Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Merit Systems Protection Board is no longer describing itself as independent. In recent weeks, the board has been removing the word independent from its public-facing materials. The action has raised questions of confidence in other MSPB processes. And here with more details is Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
This is really fascinating. Why does the MSPB say it's making this change?
Well, we heard from an MSPB spokesperson who said that the word independent is being taken down in light of the Supreme Court decision in Trump versus Slaughter. So what happened there was that President Trump fired the head of the FTC last year without giving a reason, despite a provision of federal law that requires a reason to fire the heads of an independent agency. So that ultimately led to the Supreme Court decision where they ruled that in favor of Trump's decision there, and that essentially expanded the president's powers to fire the heads of independent agencies. Even though it was dealing with the FTC specifically, it applies to other agencies, including the Merit Systems Protection Board here. Trump also notably fired the MSPB leader, Kathy Harris, last year. That case was later dismissed from the Supreme Court, but definitely a pattern here. And now something where we're seeing this impact MSPB's description as well.
It sounds like it's more than just removing a word, though. Where have you seen the lack of independence appear in other ways for MSPB?
Well, there's been definitely a lot of changes that the MSPB has been making. So, for example, they in March had a decision where they are kind of letting, they say that they don't have jurisdiction to intervene in agency firing decisions if those cite constitutional authority. We also saw New York Times reporting later that the White House was heavily involved in conversations leading up to that decision from MSPB. So that's one example where they're essentially taking away authority or jurisdiction from themselves. But we've also seen just the simple lack of independence in the word sense on MSPB's website, in job postings. So on USA Jobs, they are not using that word anymore, and now instead just describing themselves as a quasi-judicial agency. So that's just a clear signal that this is going to be a recurring pattern for the board.
This really sparked some pretty quick reaction. What have you heard out there?
I did speak with Ray Limon, who was a former MSPB member last year who retired in February 2025. He raised, of course, a lot of concerns about what this would mean for the MSPB and just looking more broadly at how they've changed a lot of their regulatory processes. He says that this is likely going to erode federal employees' confidence in being able to use MSPB's appeals processes without any interference or having that true independence. I will say that the MSPB spokesperson does say the board's adjudicatory functions are not changed because of the removal of the word independence, and then it's only to do with leadership. But I think there are definitely broader concerns that this is going to change how federal employees interact with the board, and just a question of, what this is going to mean in the long term for MSPB as well.
And how does this fit with some of the other changes that MSPB has been making over the past few months?
There's been a lot of changes and even more coming up as well. But the most recent one we saw was that the MSPB issued joint regulations with the Office of Personnel Management in June, where they're looking to overhaul what's called the Douglas factors, which are the procedures essentially that agencies use and factors that they have to consider when firing federal employees. So they're looking to remove those factors and make it more of a case-by-case basis. There's also been, for example, schedule policy career has affected MSPB as well. Their attorney advisors and supervisory attorney advisors have all been moved to the new schedule where they no longer have civil service protections. Those are positions that the board is also now hiring for. So that's something where, we've seen a change there as well. And again, just that March decision that I mentioned where the board was kind of removing itself from the process and agency firings that have to do with constitutional authority. That ruling is still in the works, and it's actually, we're going to see an en banc hearing this fall in an appeals court dealing with that. So more to come on that. on that side of things, but definitely a lot of changes in terms of the regulations and processes that the board has had for essentially decades.
So does this mark kind of the culmination of all of these changes for MSPB, and now it just needs to get its processes together, or are there more fundamental changes yet to come?
There is even more coming. The Office of Personnel Management has 3 different proposed regulations that have to deal with MSPB's authority and their jurisdiction again. So what is happening there is that they're trying to move different appeals processes for federal employees if they're removed from their jobs. Typically, if a federal employee is removed for a suitability action, if they're fired while on their probationary period, or if they're removed from their job due to a reduction in force. If any employees in that situation decide or believe that they were wrongfully terminated or removed, then they have the opportunity to appeal that agency decision to MSPB currently. However, OPM's regulations, although proposed right now, are looking to remove all of those processes out of MSPB and into OPM itself. This is also something that has raised a lot of flags about just independence and having employees have a fair process there. And if they do decide to appeal, again, that's all coming down the pipeline still, but something that has raised a lot of concerns for sure.
It sounds like as they move in that direction, there really won't be much work left for MSPB to do.
It's definitely going to be a much narrower authority for them. That's something that James Woodruff, who's Trump's nominee for the MSPB chairman, he said that in his nomination hearing that MSPB's jurisdiction is relatively narrow, and that's his view of things. So I would think that this is all kind of aligning, and we're going to see this all kind of come together likely in the next several months.
That's Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for this story.
Thank you.
You can find her story at federalnewsnetwork.com.